all the scars, I'm a human being. Cover them with tattoos so you can't see. Knew it from the start.
We are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Tuesday night Tackle Talk. Hey, sorry I'm a couple minutes late, guys. It took me a second. There was some things that need to get restarted. You know how it is. And then I heard the audio was terrible, and I was like, oh, let me go ahead and reset that now. So that's what I've been doing. What have you guys been doing? How's your mom? All right, let's go up to the top of this list right here and see we got Rachel. Oh, Rachel takes first from Kristen J. Oh no, Jeff's in the house. Shawanda, Bass Queen, David Proctor, C Dutch, Rod Slug. What's going on, you guys? What have you guys been doing? Everything looks good. Trisha made it. What's going on, Trisha? You guys, tonight we are going to talk about a little secret, a little known secret that a lot of people won't tell you. But you know what? Your boy Beards is. I'm going to tell you. I can't keep it from you any longer. I've been harboring this one for a long time, you guys, and really trying to make you feel like just listening will help you catch more fish. But this is going to be that one tip that I never thought I'd share, but just the tip. What's going on, Greg Ellis? Hey, everybody. All right, so without further ado, you guys, we're just going to jump right into this. We'll have a story time throughout the evening, and it'll be funny, and we'll enjoy ourselves. But until then, let's get right to the point. You know what I'm saying? Let's get into this. Let's get some different tunes going, something more appropriate, and we will move right into the next phase. You guys ready? Let's get into it. One of the most important things that I can tell you guys is this will change your fishing game if you hear me out, but interesting as it may seem, not a lot of people believe me, but we're going to go over a few reasons why it's so important. Can anybody tell me in the chat, well, what could I possibly be talking about? Anybody, go ahead. If you're watching the video after, leave a comment down below if you think you know. Alright, you guys know what time it is. Kristen J, that's for you. Got the big HS socks. You guys know how this works. Alright, let's get into this. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to grab this box. We're going to move something real quick because I didn't bring my chair over here for my little table, and we'll make this happen. Yeah, so of course, it's Tuesday, and I think that's when all of my computer software updates. I swear it is. And so there was some updates today, guys. Updates! And you know how that goes. Everything gets reset. All right, you guys, what am I talking about? Let's see who guessed here. Oh, thanks, Bass Queen. I'm sorry you missed. Bass love roast beef sandwiches. Jeff, that is their second favorite thing. Yep, Kristen J likes the socks. Aww. All right, here it goes, guys. This is what's crushing a lot of you guys, and you don't even realize it. Poundage on your line. Your choices of line poundage and diameter, you guys, are just crushing you. I mean, it's a terrible thing to have happen, and it sucks. But realistically, a lot of the time you're not catching fish is because you're using too big of a line. And I know what you're thinking. Now, some setups require it. I totally understand where you're coming from, but hear me out, okay? The last thing you want to end up doing is coming into a situation where you're looking for that soft bite and you're rolling 75-pound braid. Now, don't get me wrong. I roll 75-pound braid. I got 65 right here, but I also carry 20, and I'll tell you why. The thing that I found is on the real soft bites, even with a lower poundage line, like even a 20-pound braid. Now, in this particular product, this is just spider wire, and their 20-pound braid has a .010 average diameter. So that's pretty interesting. Now, let's get over here and let's check this out. Because Seagar has the old Smackdown 8-strand, and their .011 is 30 pounds. So yeah, it would probably be the exact same braid circumference. The difference is going to be 8 strands as opposed to 6 with the spider wire. Nonetheless, the thing that you guys have to remember is if you're using the wrong line size, there's probably about a 99.98% chance that you're not going to end up feeling the fish. You're not going to feel the bite. Not every bite's the same, you guys. We have to remember that together. Say this to yourselves aloud. Not every bite's the same. Now, the reason I say that is because if I'm in a finesse situation and I'm trying to use something like, I don't know, just something I really like a lot, like my 10th ounce Ned rig heads and my 10th ounce offset EWG shaky heads, I will not be running anything higher than a 20-pound braid. I'm going to stay nice and as small a diameter as I can possibly get, because that's going to give me the ability. Now listen, depending on my rod is going to depend on what I'm looking at, but hear me out. That's a 10th ounce jig head, okay? You're not throwing that on a bait caster. Now, if you're down in the 10-12 pound bait caster and you're looking at doing something like fluorocarbon, be prepared for the wind to affect you very greatly. Could you do it with 20-pound braid on a bait caster? Sure you could, but it better be medium or light medium, or even some of that new ultralight BFS or whatever they're calling it, ultralight series. That's pretty interesting. I'd like to check some of that out in a bait caster and be able to throw some of this lighter stuff. But nonetheless, it can be done if you know how to set up your equipment. And a lot of people don't realize it, but your bait weight, your line weight, size, and diameter, and the setup on your rod length and rod strength and action type will determine whether or not you can use certain lures with your particular setups. Kenny calls it horse pucky. Horse pucky. Kenny said, I'll throw that 10th ounce you got right there on my 75-pound braid baitcaster setup, buddy. That's great. What's going on, man? Now, let me ask you something, Bass Queen. Bass Queen says, guys, that she's running 10 pounds, what she has on right now. Is that 10-pound braid, or is that 10-pound fluoro? Is that 10-pound mono? Hooks are circle for a light bite. Haven't missed a bass yet. Okay, well, are you running a lot of wacky rigs? Or are you running a lot of worms? How you rigging that, Bass Queen? Just a question for everybody. I caught one of your videos the other day. That was pretty neat. I watched it. I'm a nice guy like that. Now, the only thing that I found that I did not like about the 10-pound braid is that I didn't have as much control on the fish as I wanted to have. Fishing down here in the South, it gets real dangerous when you start dropping down into 10-pound braid. Now, you need to really start thinking down here. Now, is that on a bait cast? Oh, live bait. Yeah, well, you know, it is what it is with the live bait. Circle hook's the way to go. You can feel them physically chewing on it with a circle hook. You feel it go right down their belly if you're not careful, and you guys know what I mean by that. All right, now that we've covered the first part of the show, like I said, the first thing I want to talk to you guys about and questions to start really asking yourself as you come into this next feed up season. Because let's be real, guys, that's where we're at. We're coming into that feed up, pre-spawn feed up season where the whole end of the August time becomes, oh boy, I'm killing it. We've got a lot of different bait transitions, and that's another thing that's going to determine whether or not you're going to land some of the biggest fish of your life this time of year, or you're going to go out there and just sling all day and waste a lot of time on, you know, on a chance. When I say feed up, guys, based on where you live, you need to find out what the majority of your bait fish are. You got to find out and determine what seasons the fish are doing what and what size they're going to be. Now, that all comes down to bait color. Bait color and size will determine whether or not you're going to go out there and have one of the best days of your life, or whether you're going to go out there and burn up some bearings and maybe frustration. You're going to, you know, leave some gas behind. You never know, you never know what your day is going to turn into out there. But if you can't find what we call the pattern, you're going to be in for a rough day. You really are. And your pattern is going to be casting. Casting's going to be your pattern, just so we're all clear on that one. And you guys know what I'm talking about. We've all experienced it. We've all had the skunk in the boat. And that's why, basically, this is not something for you guys that are experienced. This information might just be a reiteration of the mistakes that you make yourself as an angler when you're out there and you're struggling. So don't take this as y'all do this, you'll catch bigger fish. Well, if you ain't on the water, first of all, if you don't have a line in the water, you're not going to catch any fish. Small water, welcome to the party, bud. I told you, pattern today was no pattern. Yeah, no, I know exactly where you're coming from, John. That's why I think, tonight's episode is going to be geared more towards the beginners, just to give them an idea of how we try to set this stuff up. And then it's going to be pushing some of you more experienced fishermen out there, and the guys that do this for you, even guys that do this for a living. It just might click that one moment where you remind yourself, I knew I should have done that. I knew I should have done that. I'm the king of not retying with 9 rods. I'll sling all 9 all day and still go home with a big fat 0. And meanwhile, I find out Wacky Rig was the only one I didn't have tied on that day. And instead of trying it, I just continued to burn that same 9 rod pattern and struggle, baby. You guys know the rules. Burn it up. One second, guys, getting set up here. All right, so just so you guys know, every time I do a show, okay, I set up a box. So if you look around and you look on the floor, there's boxes, and all these boxes have like all kinds of like scattered fishing lures, of every different, all the weird stuff we hold up and talk to each other about every day when we do the tackle talks on Tuesdays. I have it in a box. So last weekend I spent like 4.5 hours reorganizing all these boxes. Okay, what an absolute nightmare, but I did it. And then I made tonight's box for the show, and I was like, oh my God, here it goes again. All right, guys, let's first talk about something that we all underestimate all the time. I know I personally do, and I know I'm telling you right now, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of this, and that is I fear the frog. And I don't mean I fear the frog like I'm afraid to throw it. I mean when I see the perfect situation where the vegetation's right and the heat, hear me out, the heat, as long as it is squelching, torturous, brutal hot, find the heaviest, thickest cover you can and sling a frog at it just for giggles. Okay, just for giggles. And I'm going to tell you, this is the time of year where there are stray frogs just wandering. I know what you're thinking. How do you know there's stray frogs wandering, Jay? Okay, I'll tell you how I know. Because we just had a great time on Sunday. We had a birthday party at the house. Jenny Lynn made another year down. And the best part about it was I woke up today, went to work, did my thing, got off of work, walked out on the back porch, looked at my beautifully clean, wait a minute, what is all that at the bottom of my pool? Throw it in the chat if anybody thinks they know what I found in the bottom of my pool. All right, we got the first guesses in. We got a gator, turtle. Kenny's still calling the BS on that one. The sand that was in my pockets when I canned him on the out. No, Rod. Thank God it was not a deuce. You remember that in Caddyshack when he was like, duty? No, thank goodness I didn't find a deuce in my pool. But what I did find was about a 9 foot by 9 foot area of the pool that was completely saturated at the bottom in frog eggs. And I know my chlorine's right. They were just desperate to get in my pool. You understand? Desperate. So right off the rip, I had to hook up the big animal vac and just right through them and then empty the whole filter, clean the entire system out, and redo the pool. Well, in that, it clicked in my mind that the only thing that I haven't transitioned to all year is some type of frog or popping frog. Now, so we're blazing hot. Everybody's hating life. Where are we looking, guys? We're looking on that shade side. And we're looking into that transition between the shade and the light, because that's where predators will hunt when those fish are coming up, depending on where the sun is. Now, hear me out, because I've kind of been putting the sun into this whole equation a few times here and wondering why I was having trouble, not realizing that it was just the direction I was fishing based on the location of the sun. Now, look for those ambush points and those ambush areas where that transition occurs between a shaded area and a light area. That's an excellent area to work a frog if you've got vegetation in that area. Baby Ruth, why don't you fish the Bassmasters? Kenny, I fish the Cabela's series every year, so I'm not really I'm not in it. I don't even own a boat, you know what I mean? I jump on with a buddy when I get a chance, and that's how I roll my tournaments, and I jump on with a buddy every chance I get when I want to make some content, because that's where you can catch some bigger fish. All right, get a tadpole lure. Yeah, no, these weren't tadpoles. This is what I'm saying. They were still in egg form, and they were still teeny tiny, but that's kind of gave me an idea for tonight's episode to talk to you guys about. And one of the things that I have been successful with, but I still can't bring myself to throw them when I should be tying one on, are these stupid pop shads. These things are a trip, man. They're totally buoyant. I like to throw the frog with the big double hook, but I mean, I can roll one of these with a 5-aught and really get in the nastiest of nasties and just blue, and it's unbelievable, man. Sometimes I've had some success with these over the years. Now remember, guys, what we talked about earlier. What are our colors? What are our imitation colors? What are we looking at? Are we looking at a chartreuse belly green? Are we looking at a chartreuse on a watermelon like that? I don't know. You know, look at what you're trying to imitate. Look around in the water. Look around at the vegetation. Look around at the wildlife and see if you can do what? Match the hatch. The next thing that I go to, and this is the time of year when you're going to start getting into the big easy gamblers, you know, and you're going to get into like 4 and 5 and 6 and maybe even 8-inch swim baits. You're going to see a lot of guys working a lot of swim baits. Now, my suggestion on the swim baits, just so we're all on the same page, okay, hold on. Jeff, that's an excellent question. What are my thoughts on fishing tournaments on TV where they weigh the fish as soon as they land them? Jeff, I say that's 100% should be a go every single time. That fish has no reason to ride back. It should be dropped off. There should be a penalty for having it outside too long. Should be a penalty if you're a little rough on that fish. I agree. And that's an interesting, now the FLW, what is that? I forget the name of that series now. I totally brain farted on that, Jeff, because I was just going to make a very valid point, and that was this last tournament that I was in on the Cabela's series. They adopted the one hook in the mouth rule, meaning that came from the, what is it? Is it the FLW or the Bass Fishing League, BFL? Those guys, they turned around and adopted, well, the Cabela's tournament adopted that same one, and if there was questions on where your hook marked in the mouth, they'd poly on it. So that was interesting to see that rule come in. Not that I have problems like snagging fish or nothing like that. I don't ever try that, but it was just interesting to see that they adopted a new rule in the Cabela's tournament this year about the one hook in the mouth. I thought that was a pretty good idea. I don't know if it ever kept anybody from winning any money, but you know how that goes. The old pork rod ride. I'm with you, man. All right, so like I was saying, guys, this is the time of year where you got to know what kind of water you live in. What are your colors? What do your feeder fish look like? If you're up north, chances are you're not throwing something that look like shiner. Chances are you're going to be throwing something more that look like brim. You know, you guys got to start thinking about the color patterns and the size of some of the fish and the bait fish that you're trying to imitate. Now, if you're using something like a fluke, you're looking at like a stick, you know, what do they call those, stick fish, or not stick fish, flute fish or whatever they're called. They're just a small little bait fish, pinfish, that's what they're called. I mean, flukes imitate really good pinfish, so you've got to give yourself what are your color on your pinfish in that area. So my suggestion for any of you down south guys, and I know a lot of you guys are going to be like, yeah, we already know that. Yeah, some people might not, you know, but right now we're getting into shiner season, so whites. Your whites and your silvers are going to be, turn it up. Bring some noise, you know what I mean? Because those two colors on themselves, white on white, silver on white, white on silver, yeah, chartreuse some, it just depends on what your watercolor or water clarity is. But again, look at your size. Start with something small and then work your way up. If you're not hitting on 6-inch baits, and you started on a 6-inch bait, you could spend all day throwing that same 6-inch bait, when in reality all you had to do is drop down to a 4-inch bait and you could have been hammering it. Or you might end up having to go to an 8-inch bait and start handling it. So I think my rule of thumb when I'm out there fishing is my goal is to catch fish. If I'm not catching fish, then I don't know what I did out there. So I try to make any adjustments I can. Again, if I know my bait fish in the area are 6 inches, because I just watched my buddy catch a fish and it hacked it up, I'm going to go to 6-inch size baits. You know what I mean? I'm going to try to match that color. But if we've been swinging all day and nobody's hit anything, you're going to see me start with my basic patterns. A lot of Florida fish. I'm going to start with my whites. I'm going to go to my silvers, and then I'm going to go to something in black, depending on the water clarity, and I'm going to start working it. That's cool, Rod. Rod's got trouts and the wallers. Trouts and wallers. But again, guys, like I said, I'm going to start with something in a 4-inch, all right? From that point, I'm going to push into something like we just got done talking about, into a 6-inch. As you can see, there's a bunch of these here missing because these right here, I've caught some fish on these right here. Now, I'm going to use just a single 5/0 hook on these guys as I reel them, depending on whether I'm what's called keel weighted. I know you guys know what keel weighted is. For those of you that don't know what keel weighted is, give me 1 second. I'll show you. All right, guys, these are keel weighted swim bait pro bullets. These are pretty cool. I like running these when I'm running these big baits, and I'll show you why here in just a second. There you go, guys. Keel weighted swim bait. There's my keel. Got a little swim bait head here. These are 3/16 of an ounce. I think these are plenty big on a 4/0 hook. These work fantastic with a big old 5-inch bait or 6-inch bait like that. This is going to give it a real slow ascend. It's going to give it a controlled ascend because of the keel weight. It does offset the head weight, but it allows it to flow a little bit more naturally down towards the bottom, which will allow that kick tail to just continuously flutter as it falls. You'll be surprised how many times that'll trigger a strike, guys. You will be surprised. That will then lead you up to the next thing, which as your seasons progress, or as your bait fish or whatever the bigger fish in your area or any fish in your area are attempting to feed on, can bring you all the way into what I like to call the danger zone. Before we get into the danger zone, guys, again, most important thing you can remember, you gotta have 100 different colors. You gotta have your white, you gotta have your chartreuses, and it would always behoove you to have something in a silver with like flake, because that'll get you. If you're running through those kinds of colors and your bait fish are in any way, shape, or form shiner colored, it's game on. All right, and then that brings me into my next play. I know what you're thinking. You're going to go bigger than 6-inch? Yeah, sometimes I have been known, and I've gone as far as 10-inch. Just so you guys get an idea, that's a 10-inch swim bait. It's the Mag Swims. And again, like I said, I'm going to go with something in a white. I'm going to go with something in a dark. This is like a purple, I forget what they call this color here. Purple Demon. I was going to try that down on the Okeechobee, John. Something like a big old 10-inch. Now, guys, these are very unconventional hooks that you're going to use on these. These are pretty interesting. These are a 7/0 hook. Now, you're talking about, when we start talking about aughts, guys, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about distances. We're talking about distances here as well as here. So, as you see, 1/0. 4/0. So the 7/0 has a shank, which is this section right here of the hook, that's like this long. So this hook is 5.5 inches long, roughly, going into a 10-inch swim bait. So you got to kind of play with what you're doing, but know that if you're going to step into the really big swim baits, you better have really big hooks to rig them. Now, I'll tell you why. If you go out there and you throw that 10-inch swim bait, okay, and you throw that thing on even a 5/0 hook, you're going to be pressed, because a 5/0 hook realistically is only like 3.5 inches long, and you still got 7 inches of bait back there. And if something's big enough to hit that thing, I'm going to want to take a chance with a big hook. if you understand where I'm coming from. A lot of wire. I want to have a real strong wire. I'm going to have a real strong knot. Now, a lot of guys will say, I'm throwing that on 75-pound braid. Back to the original start of the conversation, which is, are you going to be able to allow that bait to move freely enough with 75-pound braid? I don't know. Again, stick something in the comments. I'll hit some more music. Six to 8, Jeff. That's funny. That's funny. 30-pound. Yeah. No, see, John's got the right idea. John's got the right idea. Between 20 and 40 is, I think, your most efficient. If I'm running my spin casts, yeah, power. You like the Power Pro, huh, John? I'm a Seagar man myself. I've had them. It's saved me a bunch of times. I've had to throw some line out, but it has saved me some fish. But realistically, I don't think about it like this, guys. So we just went through a pretty good a look at different size swim baits when we start talking about this time of year. Now, if you guys are wondering if I'm saying you should be throwing swim baits this time of year, the answer is yes. Yeah, I would be throwing some kind of swim bait this time of year. Again, when this is coming around into that Big Easy Gambler time of year, for those of you that know about the Big Easy Gambler, that wedge on the back of that thing will get you bit, buddy. It'll get you bit quick. I got a buddy who's got a little trick to the way he rigs his Big Easy, and it works for him every time. And it's interesting. We'll go through like little hacks and stuff like that one night on a stream, but tonight we get a little bit of purpose here. Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. John went ahead and skipped into my next point that I wanted to make, because I know we always like to talk about it, and I like you guys to hear it. How are we retrieving these things? How are we bringing this thing back? And John likes to keep it in the top of the column. That's why I choose to go with the Z-Man products myself. They are neutral buoyant. They do tend to float unless I got a good amount of weight on them. They won't really progress down as fast. They'll move slow, and it's really, really nice. But rod position is very important here, guys. Now, if I'm bringing this thing back with my rod up at about a 45, okay, and I'm just in a constant reel, the bait's just going to stay on the top and appear to be almost like a wake bait. Now, how do you determine whether or not you're reeling the bait at the correct speed is whether or not you have that undulation of the tail, that side-to-side flutter movement. If you're not, it won't flutter. It'll just drag itself through the water. If you're too fast, you'll notice that it's not keeping any kind of rhythm. It's too erratic. Now, can you be too fast with a swim bait? And be honest with you, I don't know. And I'll tell you why. The next thing we're going to talk about is retrieve speed. Like I said, we just got into that a little bit, but what type of retrieve? Are you going to do the burn it? I'm probably going to try the burn it. Are you going to do the off cadence like we like to talk about, with little speed bursts, little slow downs, little stop and goes? I'm going to try that if nothing else matters, you know. Would I do a yo-yo lift and pop? Now that's going to depend on, am I using a weighted head or a non-weighted head? Because like I said, again, with my particular swim baits, I have neutral buoyancy, so if I just sling it out there with a 5-aught, it's just going to lay on the top of the water and look like a shiner that's just laying on the top of the water. So the yo-yo would work if I had a weighted head, and I would just use a short lift technique. Now you're talking, now in my straight retrieve, if I know that I'm targeting a foot down in the water column and I want to give it some kind of, you know, continuous action in that area of the water column, I'm going to use the tip down technique with the off cadence reel. That's another one that I like to throw out there a lot too, just to give you guys an idea. All of these things that we talk about on the show, and a lot of the guys that you see in the chat and stuff like that, these guys will all, any fisherman will tell you that if you pick up the same reel, the same rod and reel with the same lure on there and work it the same way every day, will you get bit every day? Probably not. Will you have a day that you're going to do the right thing and it's going to be fire? Sure will. Sure will. The difference comes into when are you going to change that technique? When do you have to change that technique? And when you are hitting that 0 day, can you make that change mentally as well as in the presentation? That's a good question for yourself when you're out there fishing, guys. See, and this is where the head games come in. You know what I mean? John uses weighted belly hooks, keel weighted. Yeah, that's a good one too, John. We got a couple more things we're going to talk about here, though, guys. So if the swim baits aren't hitting, where are we going, guys? What are you throwing? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. So Lindia changed it up, John, to the pinfish, huh? The 5-inch fluke, mag fluke, or you guys have one made from Bruiser Baits. Bruiser Baits got one of those. So, as I said earlier, guys, frogs. Frogs. Make sure this is a Dean Rojas right here. Popping frogs. Pretty nice. 3/8, I think that is 3/8 of an ounce on that one. Notice my color patterns here, guys. This one's got like a white belly. Don't worry about so much the top, but we're looking at that silver belly. Then my next pattern is, as everybody, green, dark green or black. This is actually a green pumpkin. That's a 1/2 ounce. This is a, well, according to the nose, this is just a walking frog, so that's not really as special as it should be. What we talked about last week, guys, the jigs. You know you got to bring a jig, okay? Just some ideas, guys. Like I said, when all else fails this time of year, I start changing things way up, and it's important that we all remember that, because the last thing we want to do is strike out. That's never any fun. White. This thing's been charred up. Look at that. See all them scratches? That's bass fishing right there, boys and girls. White will get it too. Don't think it won't. Now, you guys are going to notice all my little tails and feet are all different sizes and stuff like that. It all depends. I've worked these frogs for a while, so I know this one's been cut a little bit and it didn't quite get the right waggle that I wanted, so I cut it again and then I got the right waggle, but this one did it on this one. Yeah, it all depends. Guys, when all else fails, red rattle trap. I believe, yep, this is a rattler, and as you guys can see, this thing has been marked for death. All right, marked for death. But this color right here, guys, coming on that time of year, then when they start feeding up and getting crazy, getting all active, red, it's like blood in the water. They're like sharks. All right, this one. I'm going to something like this too, guys. Don't think for a second I won't. This is a tungsten, one knock. You guys remember? I know you guys remember the one knocker sound. That's a good one right there, and that's in the silver. I'm sorry, that's in the golden shiner. We get those down here in a couple lakes. Look at that, nice, beautiful. Those are crank wraps. Just so you guys know, those crank wraps are really cool. You ought to check those out if you've never seen them. I'm also going, guys, straight old school Bill Lewis 1/2 ounce in the silver. Just hard silver. You know the deal. If you've ever fished this thing, this is the Bill Lewis Rattail Trap in silver, chromed out. This, again, another one that'll change your fishing day. It really will. Now, another thing, you guys, just an idea for you, because I know some of you are thinking to yourselves, well, we don't live down south. Well, even us down south guys tend to forget about one of the most important things in the summer, and that is bottom contact. Don't forget, guys, get yourself a good size 8+, maybe 10, 12 deep diver. A lot of people say, well, I don't have 12 foot of water where I fish. All right, listen, I fish this thing in like 6 foot. And I do it for a reason. So I'm right down at the bottom when I start my retrieve, and I am heavy bouncing. I mean, this thing is chipped up. If I showed you the front of this thing, it is all nicked. It is all scraped. It is all chunked from me hitting objects on the bottom of the water and just dredging. excuse me, just dredging through the bottom. Because again, in the summer, bottom contact, so important. So important. The last one a lot of you guys might not have thought about, but I find it in my transition quite often, you know, and that is spooks. Topwater spooks. I'm going to keep these things tied up. Okay. I learned a valuable lesson. These things are pretty sharp. Walking bait spooks, guys. Stick baits, pencil baits. Something that gives a nice S pattern when you're popping it across the top. Maybe a little splash, maybe a little jingle. Prop baits, you guys know about those. Those are also a big deal this time of year. Don't be afraid to change that pattern. Don't be afraid to try something that you haven't tried. Don't be afraid to experience what you know, a lot of guys don't experience, and that is catching a big fish. You know, and sometimes these subtle little changes, just some of the baits that we've talked about tonight, and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in its entirety, will show you that you can make something happen with this little box that I just showed you guys right there, and just that few things, you know, just the ideas. Those, I'm telling you, this time of year, especially us down south, guys, once we break this nuclear thermal heat wave that we've had, that we like to call climate change, also known as summer, this is going to be an interesting year, because we're on a pretty good streak of big fish earlier in the year. And if those big fish go right back into that repeat cycle, depending on loss numbers, we could end up like really catching some good sized fish come the end of this year, guys, for sure. Hopefully. Yeah, I've been seeing some of the bellies, John. Well, guys, let me just go ahead and say that's the end of the information part. All right, now we're hanging out with the chat. Sorry, guys. I want to get that out there in the beginning. I do have people that have mentioned they listen to the show just for the tip part, and then they're out when it comes to the chat. And that's cool. You know what I mean? I totally understand it. But I can't neglect the chat any longer. You guys have sat through that whole boring episode. I appreciate it, though. I hope you guys take all that stuff we just talked about. I know I kind of ran a bunch of stuff at you all at once and kind of threw you for a loop, but guys, I'm just gonna tell you, I know how it feels to be skunked this time of year, and it happens. And the other thing that you have to remember is that no one that considers themselves an experienced angler doesn't have something in that boat or in that box or in that bag or even in that silly little tote that can end up changing their fishing day. You really do. Do not be afraid to retie. Do not be afraid to change colors. Do not be afraid to really pay attention to what you're doing, because again, if you're the guy trying to throw the 10th ounce on the 60-pound braid, you're going nowhere. You're just going to cause yourself a lot of frustration. Now, if you're the guy that's throwing the half ounce on the 10-pound braid, you're doing the exact opposite, but the same thing at the same time. Because if you do end up tackling that big fish, you just lost your lure. I mean, that's pretty much the bottom line. You were not prepared for that fish. You did not equip yourself properly to do the most important thing when it comes to fishing, and that is landing that fish. That's your goal. You're going to cast a million times. That's great. Catching a fish is just that 1 second of interruption that you were retrieving for the 496th time in the last hour. You know what I mean? All right, let's see what we got here. Bass Queen, I find those kind of lures all the time when the water is low. Yep, you know that. It's almost prime time, John says. Fish are getting fat. Jay, for the third time, did you see the pig I caught? Of course I did, John, and I thumbs up it. You know that. I didn't want to talk about it yet, John. I want to get my spiel out before I start talking about you coming in with a 7.5. Goodness. Pigs and bigs. Yeah, no, it was beautiful, John. Rod comes in with the old whopper plopper, solid white, looks like a big bobber with a big treble hook. Yeah, and this is what I'm saying, guys. I watch my bait the whole time. Yep, never take my eyes off it. Yeah, man, no, don't break your concentration level for sure. Don't ever do that. When you're not thinking about catching fish, when you're not thinking about that retrieve, when you're not giving that 100% mental game when it comes to fishing, that'll be when you get bit, and that'll be when you miss it. especially when you're not focused. And that'll really bother you, because then you'll get hyper vigilant for like the next 30, 40, 50 casts. And when nothing happens, you need to get a bite of a sandwich. That's what ends up happening.
Yeah, Rod, you got that search bait. That's why. That's that search bait. I love when that big rig. Yeah, no. See, it all depends. That's one of my favorite parts too, John, is seeing it. But then I over anticipate. So sometimes it's better that I don't see it. Sometimes it's better that I don't know that it happened. And then I can use my instinct, my reaction, like a puma. You know what I'm saying? To do some kind of crazy jerk hook set, looking all like I got 20 pounds on this bad boy. Meanwhile, it's like maybe 14 inches, but I'm giving it to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know my hooks are going to set. And every hook set's different, guys. That's another thing. We'll have a whole conversation about different kind of hook sets. But realistically, I mean, we could go on for days, but that's not today's episode. Today's episode, guys, was really more about just reminding ourselves that something in our box, our bag, or our boat has the ability, with one of those 26 rods that we've got stored upon either the garage, the house, the car, the boat, the trailer, the back of the truck. Somewhere in there is a setup that you can match to something you have that will land you a fish. I don't believe myself personally, and I'll give you guys a little insight into me. I am a firm believer in fish are everywhere. And I know what you're thinking. That's not possible, man. Well, what I mean by that is that I think that I can locate fish given a few different things that I've learned from some of the most fantastic fishermen you've ever met, because I've been around a lot of really, really cool people, and a lot of the guys that I hang out with, hardcore fishermen. This is their lives. Everything about it's about fishing. And when you start to see the fish, and I don't mean it like I physically see the damn fish, I just see signs of things. And I'll give you a for instance. Me and a buddy of mine were out fishing on headwaters one time, and I just seen one stick. And when I say one stick, guys, I'm not kidding you. This is what I seen. That's all that was sticking out of the water, about 3.5 inches. You can barely see that. You understand? But it caught my eye, because in a sea of nothingness was this one piece of a stick just sitting out of the water. And I was thinking to myself, I even looked at Buddy. I said, Buddy, you see that? See that stick over there? Throw that stick over there. And he did. Sure enough, he hooked up. And I came in right behind him on that same set of sticks. I hooked up a 6.5 that day. And if we could have managed the boat in that type of wind, I mean, we had 20, 25 mile an hour gusts that day. We could have ended up picking up I think we found us a mess of bigs. I really do think. He had like a 4.5, and I ended up having like a 6.5 on the first 2 casts at this one stick. So for those of you that are thinking, what do you mean you're seeing the fish? I just see weird little things that are out of the ordinary, and yeah, you can bet I'm throwing at them for sure. I'm throwing right at them, in them, on them. I'm working 2 or 3 different baits at it, depending on what kind of environment it's in, and that's a big deal. That can change your fishing day, guys. Rod Slug says, be the fish. No, we already talked about that, man. For everything you see above the water is at least twice that. Yeah, no, and that's interesting. Now, where it comes to getting really interesting, John, is that you start getting in those reeds. Start getting in those reed patches. You start getting into the stuff like what we were fishing on the Ocklawaha River the other day, where you've got those tree root systems, where you've got big gaping holes in these trees. I got to get that video finished so you guys can see some of these big gaping holes that I got some video of, where literally there's entire root systems of trees that are 8, 10, 12 feet submerged, but that's depth. Like there's 8, 10, 12 feet of depth with just constant caverns and little things that the fish can
cook in and stare out of. And oh yeah, no, that place is a trip, man. That's an interesting environment, and it works a lot of the same way with like reeds or tules or what, there's 100,000 different vegetations in all of our fishing environments. I'm sure there's got to be a ton, but down here in Florida, you get those times a year where people are like, just work the ridge line, just, work the weed line, just work right down that channel. I guess, John, that's what you were saying earlier. You had just running down that channel, that was pretty much the day. Oh, man. Plowed floating stuff, changing environments. Oh, that's a whole different episode, man. I would love to get into that one with you. Changing environments. Oh, how often does that happen for those of you that go out on boats? Yeah, no, that's a big deal too. Again, just as the environment changes though, remember guys, in your fishing, try to stay fluid. Not just physically fluid, mentally fluid. Although this isn't working, don't be afraid that after you've cycled through to cut it. Cut something. Cut something that matches up with something else that you have that you can use on that rod and go right to it, because that could be the one. That next cast could be the one. I think it's my memory. I have almost a photographic memory. I recognize pattern. Yeah, and that's important, Bass Queen. What's up, Drew? Drew Rupel in the house. All the way out to the wood dock. Are you kidding me, John? That was out on Headwaters, huh? Oh, man, that is a brutal one. That is a brutal one. Get an underwater drone. I've been wanting to, Rod. Personally, I've been looking at some interesting stuff, man. I'm looking into some first-person view goggles and stuff, but I got to stop spending some money for at least the rest of this year, I guess. No, you never know. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to get into the underwater drones anytime soon. Night fishing, but he's sick. Oh, that's the worst day ever, Drew. Yeah, I know. I work super early tomorrow, so there won't be any fishing for me tonight. Trust me on that one. Trust me. No. I know better. I gotta get up early. I get started early. I get home as fast as I can, and then I start my day again. You guys know how it goes. Well, listen, guys. Thank you all so much for hanging out. I appreciate you guys' time. And like we always say, guys, it's been real. It's been fun. We'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.